There's a number that appears over and over in financial history. It's not a coincidence, it's a pattern, it's mathematical inevitability. That number is 94. Portugal's real dominated global trade for 80 years. Spain's silver dollar ruled for 110 years. The Dutch guilder controlled commerce for 78 years. British pound sterling lasted for 224 years. Average them together, 94 years. The US dollar became the world's reserve currency in 1944. It's now 2025. That's 81 years. If the average holds, we have 13 years left before the mathematical endpoint arrives. But here's what's terrifying. The average doesn't tell the real story. Because when you look deeper, you discover something nobody talks about. The curse is not about time. It's about depth compounding. And depth compounds exponentially, not linearly. Today, I'm going to show you why no reserve currency in 500 years has survived this curse, why math make it impossible, and why your dollar, no matter how powerful America seems, is following the exact same exponential trajectory that destroyed every empire before it. This isn't history, this is mathematics. And mathematics doesn't care about patriotism. The hidden pattern, it's not time, it's depth velocity. Everyone focuses on how long empire lasted, 80 years, 110 years, 224 years. But you are measuring the wrong variables. The real pattern is not duration, it's depth velocity. Specifically, how far does government debt grow compared to economic outputs? Let me show you something nobody explains. When Portugal became reserve currency power in 1450, the debt to revenue ratio was roughly 1:1. For every 1 ducat of revenue, they had 1 ducat of debt. Manageable. By 1550, 100 years later, that ratio was 4:1. 4 ducats of debt for every ducat of revenue. The interest payments alone consumed half their budget. By 1580, when Spain absorbed Portugal, the ratio has reached 8:1, mathematically unsustainable. Spain followed the identical trajectory, just faster. In 1530, their debt to revenue ratio was 2:1. By 1557, just 27 years later, it was 8:1. King Philip II defaulted because the math gave him no choice. He tried again, but the debt back up. By 1575, 18 years, 8:1 again. Another default. The time between defaults kept shrinking because the debt was compounding exponentially. This is not the curse. Once you become the reserve currency, you must run deficits. Why? Because the world demands your currency for trade. The only way to supply enough currency is to print it. And the only politically acceptable way to print it is through deficit spending. Every reserve currency nation becomes the world's lender. And every lender eventually lends more than they can sustain. The exponential trap. Why Britain lasted longest but fell hardest. Britain is the most fascinating case because they understood the trap and still couldn't escape it. From 1720 to 1914, nearly 200 years, Britain managed their debt brilliantly. They rarely let debt exceed 100% of GDP during peacetime. They actually paid war debt after conflicts. They understood the curse and fought it. But then came the exponential trap. World War I cost 7 billion euros, more than the Britain has spent on all the previous war combined. Debt exploded from 650 million euros to 7.4 billion euros in just 4 years. That's a tenfold increase. But here's the key. It wasn't 10 times harder to manage. It was exponentially harder. Because now the interest payments consume 40% of tax revenue every single year forever. Britain had two choices, default or inflate. They choose inflate, print money, devalue the pound, erode the debt through inflation. But inflation destroys currency trust. And without trust, you can't be the reserve currency. Then World War II hit. Debt reached 270% of the GDP By 1945, at that point, Britain was paying more in interest than they spent on defense, education, and healthcare combined. The mathematics had become impossible. Bretton Woods in 1944 was not a negotiation, it was a surrender. Britain has no choice but to hand reserve currency status to America. The exponential trap had won. Here's the terrifying part: Britain lasted 224 years and still couldn't escape. The curse doesn't care how competent you are. Once debt starts compounding exponentially, the endpoint is mathematical. The American trajectory, exponential acceleration. Now let's talk about America and why the curse is moving faster than any other previous empire. In 1944, when the dollar became the reserve currency, US debt was $260 billion, about 112% of GDP after World War II. Within 30 years, by 1974, they would pay it down to 31% of GDP. America was managing the curse brilliantly. Then everything changed. In 1971, Nixon closed the gold window. The dollar became pure flat, no gold backing, and once restraints disappeared, the exponential trap accelerated. 1980, $900 billion debt. 2000, $5.6 trillion debt. 2008, $10 trillion debt. 2020, $27 trillion debt. 2025, $38 trillion debt. Look at those numbers carefully. It took 200 years to reach $900 billion. It took 20 years to add next $4.7 trillion. It took 8 years to double it again. It took 12 years to triple. That's exponential acceleration, and it's speeding up. Between October 2024 and October 2025, just 12 months, the debt increased by approximately $2 trillion. That's $25 billion per day, every single day, including today while you are watching this video. But here's where it gets mathematically insane. The interest on the debt is now $1 trillion per year. That's more than America's spending on education, more than on transportation, more than on veterans. The third largest line item in the entire federal budget is literally just paying interest. At current rates, by 2034, interest payments will exceed defense spending. By 2040, they exceed Social Security. The debt is not growing, it's compounding. And compound growth is exponential, not linear. This is the curse in real time. Portugal, Spain, Netherlands, Britain all reached the exact same mathematical endpoint, and every single one collapsed shortly after. The reserve currency paradox. Success guarantees failure. Here's the paradox nobody explains. Becoming the reserve currency guarantees eventually collapse. It's not a bug, it's a built-in feature. Why? Named after economist Robert Triffin, who explained this in 1959. If you're the reserve currency, the world needs your currency for trade. If China wants to buy oil from Saudi Arabia, they need dollar. If Brazil wants to buy electronics from Germany, they need dollars. The whole world needs dollar. But how does the world get dollars? Only one way. America has run the trade deficits. You have to send dollars out into the world by buying more than you sell. So you must run deficits, not because you are irresponsible, but because you don't. The global economy seized up from lack of dollars. But if you run deficits forever, eventually your debt becomes unsustainable and you lose currency credibility. So you are trapped. Run deficits and eventually collapse, or don't run deficits and stop being the reserve currency immediately. Portugal, Spain, Netherlands, Britain all faced this exact paradox. All chose to run deficits, all eventually collapsed under debt weight. None found a third option. The curse is mathematical, and mathematics is absolute. The acceleration phase. Why the next 10 years are critical? Every reserve currency collapse follows a three-phase timeline. Phase 1, stability, 60 to 70% of lifespan. Everything seems fine. Debt is manageable. Growth covers interest. Nobody questions the currency. Portugal 1450 to 1530. Spain 1530 to 1620. Britain 1720 to 1914. USA 1944 to 2008. Phase 2 acceleration 20 to 30% of the lifespan. Debt growth speeds up. Foreign holdings decline. Alternative emerge. Portugal 1530 to 1580. Spain 1620 to 1640. Britain 1914 to 1944. And as I said, USA 2008 at present. We are currently in phase 2. And phase 2 always accelerates faster than anyone expects. Look at the data. US share of global reserve was 71% in 1999. It's 57.74% in Q1 2025. That's a 13.26% drop in 26 years. But the drop is not linear. It's accelerating. From 1999 to 2010, the dollar dropped about 5% points. From 2010 to 2020, it dropped around 4 points. From 2020 to 2025, it dropped 4 points in just 5 years. The rate of decline is doubling. That's exponential. Phase 3, collapse, 5 to 10% of lifespan. This is when mathematical endpoint arrives. Britain 1944 to 1950. The actual handover happens quickly once the acceleration phase reaches critical mass. If the pattern holds, America's phase 3 will occur between 2030 to 2040. Why this time is not different? Every collapsing reserve currency says the same. This time is different. Spain said, "We control half the world's silver. We literally produce the money." Didn't matter. Debt compounding faster than silver production. Britain said, "We control a quarter of the earth. The sun never sets on our empire." Didn't matter. Debt from 2 world wars exceeds even the empire's vast resources. America says, "We have the strongest military, the most advanced economy. The dollar is too big to fail." Won't matter, because the curse is not about strength. It's about mathematics. At 38 trillion debt, growing by $2 trillion per year, the interest consuming $1 trillion annually. The math is already impossible. The only question is how long before the system recognizes it. The BRICS nations are building alternatives, not because they hate America, because they are reading the same math. BRICS Bridge Payment System, BRICS Pay, mBridge, central bank digital currencies. These are being built for the post-dollar world. Foreign treasury holding dropping from 50 to 30%. Saudi Arabia not renewing the petrodollar agreement. Central banks buying record gold. These are not political statements. These are mathematical hedges. The world is preparing for what mathematics says, inevitable. So what's the conclusion? The 13-year window. 5 empires, 5 reserve currencies, 5 collapses, 0 exceptions. Average lifespan 94 years. Current US dollar tenure 81 years. Mathematical window remaining 13 years. But remember, it's not about time, it's about depth velocity. The velocity is accelerating. Portugal, Spain, Netherlands, Britain, none escaped the curse. None found a way to break the exponential trap. All collapsed when stepped compounding exceeds economic growth. The mathematics that destroyed them is destroying the dollar right now. 25 billion per day compounding, accelerating, inevitable. This isn't pessimism, it's arithmetic. And arithmetic doesn't negotiate. If you like the video, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button and turn on the bell icon. Thanks for watching.